Good evening, listeners. You've tuned into Sinister Radio. Whether you're sleepless, seeking a connection to the eerie, or simply the comfort of company when the night feels a little too quiet, Sinister Radio is here for you. Tonight, 3 eerie tales of horror await you, each one more unsettling than the last, and each one a glimpse into the shadowy depths of the human soul and beyond. But fear not, for between the horror, we'll soothe your soul with the timeless sounds of vinyl jazz. Are you ready? Then dim the lights, settle in, and let the darkness in. The night awaits, and so does tonight's first story, inviting us to delve into the shadows, where strings are pulled and fate is twisted. Imagine being stripped of your free will, being a mere marionette in the hands of a malevolent puppeteer. This is the story of one such man, a man controlled by an unseen force, driven to unspeakable deeds. But who is the true villain? The puppet, or the puppet master? The first sense Matthew felt upon waking was the suffocating weight of dread. It was an oppressive, inescapable feeling, as if something unseen loomed just beyond the veil of his consciousness. He tried to reach out, to rub the sleep from his eyes, but his arm wouldn't move. Panic hit him as he struggled to command his own body. He could see, hear, and feel, but he had no control. His limbs, as though possessed by an unseen force, moved with a will of their own. Matthew's day began as if on autopilot. His legs swung out of bed, his feet hitting the cold floor. He shuffled to the bathroom, mechanically brushing his teeth, shaving, and dressing, while his mind screamed against the forced motions. But his body did not respond. As he left his apartment, he noticed small, sinister changes. He bypassed his usual route to work, and instead Matthew found himself at a crowded train station during rush hour. His body forces him onto the platform, standing dangerously close to the edge. He sees a mother standing close to him, holding her child's hand. As the train approaches, Matthew lunges forward, his body aiming to shove the mother onto the tracks. At the last second, he stumbles. Matthew gets a strange feeling that something is playing with him, using him as its toy or some kind of puppet. The mother leaves unharmed but shaken. Throughout the day, Matthew performed increasingly disturbing acts, but by midday, the acts turned darker. He found himself breaking into a house, standing over a sleeping family with the crowbar in his hand. His heart pounded in terror as his arms raised the weapon. At the last second, a shift in the air stopped him. The family stirred, oblivious to the horror that had nearly unfolded. His body turned and left, but the threat of what could have been lingered like a dark cloud. By evening, Matthew was exhausted, both mentally and physically, but his body moved with relentless purpose. He found himself in a decrepit warehouse on the outskirts of town. The flickering light of a single, dangling bulb cast eerie shadows on the walls. As he stood in the center of the room, his limbs suddenly went slack. He collapsed to the floor, gasping as control returned to him. For a brief moment, he felt the bliss of freedom. Then he heard it, a slow, deliberate clapping echoing through the cavernous space. "Bravo," a voice drawled from the darkness. "You performed beautifully." Matthew's blood turned to ice. "Who's there?" he croaked, his voice hoarse. From the shadows emerged a tall, gaunt figure, draped in a tattered cloak. Its face was obscured by a grotesque mask, a twisted mockery of a smiling visage. "I am the puppet master," it said, bowing mockingly. "And you, Matthew, are my finest creation." Matthew tried to scramble to his feet, but his body refused to obey. The puppet master lifted a gloved hand, and Matthew felt his limbs pulled upward as if by invisible strings. Why are you doing this?" Matthew stammered, his voice trembling. The puppet master's mask tilted slightly. "Why does an artist paint? Why does a musician compose? Because it is my nature. You, my dear Matthew, are a canvas for my art. And tonight, we shall create a masterpiece." As the puppet master spoke, Matthew's body stood up and began to move, each step mechanical and deliberate. He was marched out of the warehouse and onto the desolate streets. The night swallowed him whole as he was led to a quiet suburban neighborhood. The puppet master's voice echoed in his mind, cold and commanding. "This is where it ends. One final performance." Matthew's body crept toward a house, the lights within casting warm, inviting glows onto the front lawn. He recognized it instantly. It was his childhood home. "No," Matthew screamed internally. "Please, not here." But his pleas went unheard. His hands, once gentle and kind, now gripped the crowbar tightly as he approached the front door. It swung open with a creak, revealing the figures of his parents, peacefully seated in the living room, unaware of the nightmare about to unfold. Tears streamed down Matthew's face as he fought with every ounce of strength to regain control. His body moved closer, step by agonizing step, the crowbar raised high. "Stop it," he begged. "I don't want to do this." But the puppet master's laughter was his only answer. In a final, desperate act, Matthew summoned all his will, focusing on the bond that connected him to the puppet master. He visualized the invisible strings that held him captive, imagining them fraying, snapping one by one. The crowbar froze mid-swing. The puppet master hissed, "You resist," its voice sharp with surprise. How quaint. Matthew felt a surge of strength. "I won't let you control me anymore." With a primal scream, he broke free. The crowbar clattered to the floor, and Matthew collapsed beside it, gasping for air. The puppet master stood in the doorway, silent and still. It said, "Impressive, but remember, you can never cut all the strings." Then, the figure vanished, leaving Matthew alone with his parents, and leaving Matthew's mind quiet once again. In the days that followed, Matthew tried to return to a normal life. But the scars of the puppet master's control remained. Every time Matthew looked in the mirror, he saw the faint outline of invisible strings etched into his skin. A chilling reminder of the horrors he had endured. And at night, as he drifted to sleep, he could still hear the puppet master's voice whispering in the darkness, "One day, the strings will pull again." And so, the strings are cut, the final act complete. Our puppet, once bound by the will of another, now stands alone. But the question lingers, was he ever truly free? Or do we all dance to unseen forces? Alright, dear listeners. One story down, and the night is just getting started. Let's take a breather and enjoy some music. Let the music flow through you, calm your nerves. Because when we're back, another tale of horror awaits. Welcome back. You are listening to Sinister Radio, and now it's time for the next horror story. This one takes place at Halloween night, where the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. The air is colder, the shadows longer, and the moon glows like a pale witness to horrors the night might bring. The story is about a group of teenagers that didn't listen to the warnings they've been given. What if what they discovered still lingers in the shadows of the night, waiting, watching, when the night is over? In the small, forgotten town of Morrow's End, the locals had shared stories for years about the man who lived in the old mansion. No one really knew his name, and no one dared to ask. Some claimed he had lived there for decades, lurking in the shadows of the sprawling, derelict estate. His presence was felt but never confirmed. People in Morrow's End tried not to wander too close to the mansion, especially after dark, but it wasn't until 3 kids vanished one Halloween night that fear sank its claws deep into the town. Rumors were spreading fast in the little town. The missing kids had visited the old mansion just before they disappeared. So the police combed the area, dragging pawns, searching the woods, and questioning every resident, but they found nothing. No leads, no bodies. Only whispers and rumors. They had their suspicions, but without evidence, their hands were tied. As winter closed in, the town retreated into itself, each household a fortress of locked doors and shuttered windows. 3 teenagers, Becca, Zach, and Leo, had decided this would be the year they'd finally pay the old mansion a visit and find out if the rumors were true. Late, on Halloween night when the town was quiet and the moon was hidden behind a thick veil of clouds, Becca, Zach, and Leo made their way to the mansion. The road was rough and overgrown, the kind of path that nature had started reclaiming. Becca clutched her flashlight tight, her pulse quickening with each step closer to the towering structure. "Guys, are we really doing this?" Becca whispered, her voice small against the cold breeze. Leo answered, "What are you afraid of? It's just an old house." Zach laughed. "Come on guys, it's just some dusty old man and some creaky floorboards. It'll be over in 5 minutes. As they approached, they could see the faintest light glowing from a window high up in what could be the attic, flickering like a candle in a storm. The front door was unlocked. It creaked open on its own, as if it had been expecting them. Becca hesitated before she stepped inside. Her eyes darted nervously to the shadows in the windows. The air inside the house was thick and heavy, reeking of rot and something sweet, almost sickening. Zach, Becca, and Leo moved quietly, their footsteps swallowed by the ancient carpet that lined the grand hall. On the walls, they noticed strange trinkets, small bones tied together with red string. Old photographs of people they didn't recognize, all with their eyes scratched out. As Zach made his way up the stairs towards the light in the attic, he glanced back to check if they were following, but Leo and Becca exchanged a look and shook their heads. Zach went further by himself. As he went closer to the attic, he heard a soft, rhythmic sound of humming. It was drifting down the stairs like a lullaby gone wrong. Zach's heart raced, but he kept on going, each step bringing him closer to the creepy humming. Finally, he reached the attic door. It was slightly ajar, and he pushed it open to find himself in a room filled with glass jars. Each jar contained something different: locks of hair, teeth, fingernails, pieces of clothing stained with what could only be blood. In the center of the room stood an old man, his back to him, hunched over a small workbench, humming to an old record from the 50s as he meticulously cleaned a rusted blade. He was collecting all those horrifying things in the jars. The old man turned slowly, like he could sense Zach's presence. Zach gasped. The old man's face was pale, almost corpse-like, with hollow eyes that forced Zach to stand still and unable to move. He smiled, a slow, deliberate movement that revealed rows of sharpened teeth. Zach stepped back, his eyes darting to the stairs. But the old man was fast. He lunged forward, grabbing him by the wrist. His grip felt as cold and unyielding as iron. Zach screamed, but his voice was swallowed by the thick walls of the mansion. He struggled, his hands clawing at him, held him tight. The old man's breath was cold, and with a wide smile, he let Zach go. Zach stumbled back, bewildered, but before he could run, the old man spoke. He whispered, "Go home," his voice soft and unnervingly calm. "Tell them what you saw. Tell them what I am. They won't believe you." The old man turned his back at him facing the workbench, and continued his humming. Zach ran down the stairs as fast as he could. His mind were unraveling, the images of the jars. The old man's face was burning themselves into his memory. Becca and Leo were nowhere to be seen. Zach ran and ran until he reached his home, where he locked the doors. and hide under his bed with his heart pounding in his chest. Days passed, then weeks. Zach never told a soul what he had seen. When Becca and Leo asked about the screams that made them run for their lives, Zach just told them that the old man gave him a good old Halloween scare. In the end, Zach was left alone, haunted by the knowledge that the old man was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his next victims. And so, the town of Morrow's End returned to its silent, uneasy existence, never knowing the true horror that lay just beyond the edge of the little town. The collector remained, his secrets safe and his collection growing with each passing night, as he continued his dark work, unpunished and unseen. Alright, that was a little creepy. Let's take a little break with some tunes before we dive into tonight's last story. Or should I say Christmas horror story? Now, the time has come for our last story to be told, and this story, dear listeners, takes place at Christmas time. They say Christmas is the most wonderful time of the year, but this story may leave you with a different feeling. It's far from the warm and fuzzy holiday tales you're used to hear this time of year. Instead, it's a sinister twist on the season of giving. Imagine a Santa who turns the most wonderful time of the year into your worst nightmare. Now listen closely, because this is a story that will make you question just who might be watching you next Christmas. We'll start with a little holiday cheer. A melody you know very well, one you've heard every year. It's a song of joy, or so they say. But behind every cheerful note, there's a shadow lurking, waiting to slip through the cracks of your holiday comfort. Now, let the melody fill the room. Let it carry you into the season's spirit. And while you hum along, remember this: things aren't always as they seem. I hope that little holiday tune helped you get into the spirit of the season. Let's leave the comfort of the music behind and step into something far darker. Before I tell the story, let's take a moment to consider the words we all know so well. He sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, he knows if you've been bad or good. So be good for goodness sake. Does it ring a bell? You sing them every year, don't you? But have you ever stopped to listen? Really, listen? It's a cheerful tune, right? You might recognize it. The song about Santa Claus coming to town, full of jolly reminders to be good, to be kind. But if you listen closely, that little jingle, it's more than just a warning about being naughty or nice. It's a chilling reminder of what happens when someone is always watching. Not just from the window, or from the street, he's closer than that, and that's exactly where tonight's story begins. The story I am about to tell is about a man who believes he is Santa, who finds out who's naughty and nice and delivers terror instead of presents. December settled over the quiet little town. Like a heavy, suffocating blanket, snow fell in soft, soundless flurries, burying rooftops and muffling footsteps. The snowfall was heavier than usual that year. Christmas lights twinkled on every house, casting long, distorted shadows on the icy streets. Inside those warm homes, children counted down the days until Christmas morning, unaware that their wishes and dreams had caught the attention of someone far more sinister than the cheerful Santa they believed in. For weeks before the start of December, he had been watching children and their parents. Hidden in the darkness, a man known only to himself as Santa studied his chosen houses. He wasn't the Santa of legend, the jolly man in red who brought joy and gifts to the good. No, this Santa was a twisted mockery, a predator fueled by obsession and delusion. He believed he had a sacred duty, to punish those who had failed as parents and neglected their responsibilities. In his mind, the bad behavior of children was a reflection of their parents. Parents who let their kids talk back to them, be cruel to other children, or show disobedience were destroying the innocence of Christmas. They had to be punished. The first visit, December 10th, was bitterly cold, with a wind that howled through the streets like an ominous warning. It was the perfect night for Santa's first visit. It started with the Watsons, a picture-perfect family of 4. He moved silently through the snow towards their house, dressed in a homemade Santa suit. It was a patchwork of red velvet and fake fur. He had crudely stitched together himself, the seams fraying like the edges of his sanity. A fake beard completed with boots and a hat. Slung over his shoulder was a worn leather sack, not filled with toys but with his tools. A Polaroid camera, a pre-written letter, a roll of duct tape, a butcher knife, and a stack of cheerful Christmas paper. Breaking into the Watsons' house was disturbingly easy. The back door lock yielded quickly to his tools, and he crept inside with the predatory silence of a cat. The house was dark except for the soft glow of the Christmas tree in the living room, its lights casting flickering shadows on the walls. Their home gleamed with holiday spirit. Garlands hung from the banister, stockings were perfectly spaced over the fireplace, and a massive tree stood proud in the living room. Inside, the warmth of the home wrapped around him, and the faint scent of pine and cinnamon teased his nose. He paused at the end of the stairs, listening to the sounds of the sleeping family. First, he visited the parents. He slipped into their bedroom, moved with the grace of a predator, his boots barely whispering against the hardwood floor. He pulled out his Polaroid camera and snapped a picture. The camera whirred softly as he snapped a picture of them, sleeping peacefully, their faces lit by the cold flash. The whir and click of the film developing was the only sound in the room. The photo emerged, slowly revealing the parents lay peacefully asleep, blissfully unaware of the horror lurking nearby. He stared at the Polaroid as it developed, watching their features materialize with a sick fascination. Next, he crept into 8-year-old Tommy's room. The boy was sprawled across his bed. Santa tilted his head, studying the boy. The camera clicked again, and the flash momentarily lit the room like lightning. Santa pulled out a marker and, on the back of the photo, he wrote in large, looping letters, "Nice." Before leaving, he placed the photos on the kitchen table, arranged neatly, and vanished into the snowy night. Later that night, Santa visited the Johnsons. Their house stood at the edge of town, surrounded by bare, skeletal trees. Santa had been watching them for weeks, the misbehaved 10-year-old Carter and the sharp, dismissive tone his parents used with him. He decided they needed to learn what Christmas was truly about. Carter's parents had failed to teach him right from wrong. Once inside, the ritual began. Taking pictures of the parents sleeping, their faces frozen mid-dream, unaware of the cold eyes watching them. He lingered in Carter's room, observing the boy's messy desk littered with candy wrappers and discarded homework. As he snapped a photo, he whispered to himself. On the back, he wrote naughty in jagged letters, underlining it twice. As he turned to leave, he heard a little voice whispering, "Santa?" Carter's voice trembled with excitement and confusion. Santa answered, "Yes." His voice deep and gravelly, a false cheerfulness masking his true nature. The man in Carter's room smiled to him and said, "I brought you a present." He handed Carter a small, wrapped gift. The boy tore through the paper with eager excitement, but his delight quickly shifted to horror when he saw what was inside. It was a picture of his parents, but their eyes had been scratched out, leaving empty, haunting voids. Carter's gaze shifted to Santa, a mix of sadness and fear welling up in his eyes. The man stood silently for a moment, watching Carter's reaction. Then, with a cheerful smile, he turned and walked towards the kitchen. He placed the photo of Carter sleeping on the kitchen counter along with a letter written in shaky ink, before disappearing into the cold night. In the letter he wrote, "Dear Johnson family, I have been watching you. Your son, Carter, is on the naughty list this year. His behavior is unacceptable, and it is your responsibility as his parents to guide him back to the light. This is a warning. Raise him better, or you'll pay the price. As a reminder of the consequences, I gave Carter a small present. Smiley face. Merry Christmas, Santa." Carter woke his parents, crying and telling them that Santa had paid him a visit and given him a scary photo of them as a gift. They found the letter in the kitchen, along with the photo of Carter sleeping. The discovery unsettled them, so they called the police. However, there were no fingerprints, no footprints in the snow, and no signs of forced entry. On the third visit, he chose the Parkers. They had no idea they were being watched for weeks. 12-year-old Lily had been bullying classmates, screaming at her parents in public, refused to eat her vegetables and throwing items in the grocery store. Her parents spoiled her and ignored the damage she caused. He decided that Lily's parents was a failure, and failures didn't deserve to see another Christmas. In the dead of night, he slipped inside their home. The same ritual unfolded, photos of the parents, captured in their most vulnerable state. Then the photo of Lily, her face twisted in restless sleep. This time, the judgment came quickly. Naughty was written on the back of the photo. The letter he left in the kitchen was even more direct. "Dear Parker family, I have been watching you. Smiley face. Your daughter, Lily, has failed the spirit of Christmas. She is selfish, cruel, and spoiled. These traits will destroy her if you do not interfere. Shape her up, or you will not live to see another Christmas. You are a failure as her parents, and failures needs to be punished. This is a warning. Merry Christmas, Santa." On December 14th, he struck again. This time he chose the Reed family. He could sense his patience wearing thin, and a simmering anger began to rise within him. He crept into their home with the same ruthless precision as before, but this time, something went wrong. Their 12-year-old daughter, Emily, was awake. When he entered her room, she didn't scream. Instead, she stared at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Are you really Santa?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Of course," he replied, stepping closer. Her sharp gaze flickered to the knife in his hand. Then Santa said, "You've been rude and disobedient, and your parents turn a blind eye to the harm you cause. Maybe hurting you is the only way to make your parents see the consequences of their actions." Emily screamed. Her screams echoed through the house, jolting everyone awake. Santa lingered just a moment longer, hidden in the shadows outside the open window. He listened intently as Emily's voice, fraught with fear and desperation, calling out for her parents. Her parents rushed into the room, but there was no one else there. Only Emily sitting in her bed, crying, pointing at the window. The window stood wide open, letting in the biting cold wind. The final visit was the Anders family. They were different, genuine in their kindness, their 9-year-old twins, Emma and Ethan, embodying the spirit of Christmas with their generosity and good behavior. Santa felt something close to admiration for the Anders family. Inside, he moved as always, quiet as a shadow. He took photos of the parents, then crept into the children's room. Emma and Ethan slept soundly, their hands clasped under their pillows. He snapped a photo of each and wrote, with an uncharacteristic softness, "Nice" on the back of the photos. For the Anders, he left no letter, just the photos of the sleeping family as a silent nod of approval. On Christmas morning, the Anders twins found the pictures at the foot of their beds, neatly wrapped in red and green paper, and a card that said, "From Santa." The Johnsons and Parkers, however, woke to far more chilling discoveries. A second letter had arrived overnight. The letter said, "I am still watching you. You were warned. You failed to listen. You're a failure, and failures don't deserve to see another Christmas. Soon it's time for your punishment. Now, enjoy your time while you still can. Your time is almost up. Remember this. I see you when you're sleeping, I know when you're awake, and I know if you've been bad or good. Merry Christmas, Santa." In the months that followed, both families lived in constant fear. Though no harm came to them that winter, every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the hallway, filled their nights with terror. And every December, they wondered if this would be the year he returned to make good on his promises. The children he left behind would always remember the Christmas when Santa came to town. Not to bring joy, but to shatter their innocence forever. And that concludes tonight's descent into the darkness of the human soul. But even as we end tonight's storytelling, there are more sinister stories waiting to be told. Join us again soon, when we return with more stories to haunt your nights, disturb your sleep, and that lingers in your mind after turning off the lights. Until then, sleep tight and sweet dreams. And try not to let the darkness creep in. We'll be waiting for you till next time, right here on Sinister Radio.